Yes, so hi, good Yontif, good Yontif. Tonight is the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus, and it's a holiday dedicated and celebrating the getting out of jail of Reb Shneir Zalman of Liadi, who's also called the Baal HaTanya. And so this is a Tanya class, so this is our holiday, because it's, as you know, the Reb Shneir Zalman, the Alter Rebbe, was arrested because Mitnagdim or Misnagdim reported him to the Russian authorities because he was sending money to the Jews in Eretz Yisrael to support the Jewish community there. And at the time, Eretz Yisrael was under the auspices of the Ottoman Empire. So they made it out that he's supporting enemy country, being the Turks, and they framed him basically, and he got arrested. But spiritually, the meaning of the arrest was that they say that there was a kitrog, a decree against the Alter Rebbe from on high. And what was the decree? The decree was that he was teaching Chassidus to common folk, not especially learned, and bringing this very precious and very elevated teachings to people in a sort of regular way. And maybe he shouldn't have been doing that. So when he got arrested, he felt that from on high, he was also being judged. And so he actually talks about, I guess it's written that he was visited in his prison cell, I think by the Maggid of Mezrich and the Baal Shem Tov, who obviously had passed away, and he had a vision with them. And then he was released, and in his release, the feeling was that the kitrog, the decree against him teaching Chassidus, had been overturned. And so when he gets out of jail, it's not just his personal liberation out of jail at that time, but it's also a go-ahead for him to go ahead and teach Chassidus to people. And the analogy that was often used around this is that the king has a very precious jewel in his crown, and his son is ill. And the only medicine that his son will be healed from is if they take the jewel from the king's crown and crush it into into powder. And that's the medicine that the son has to eat, or drink. So the Jewish neshamas are struggling in Galut, and Chassidus is like a jewel in the king's crown, in the crown of Hashem, the deeper teachings of Chassidus, and we need it. We're suffering, we're ill from Galus, and we don't know how to serve Hashem without this extra level of illumination. So we take the jewel out of the crown, and even though to some people it seems like we're denigrating this very high teachings, here I am, and humbly myself sharing these deep Kabbalistic ideas, and you are learning them, and these kind of things. People used to maybe think you have to be big Kabbalist to learn these type of things, and here we're doing them, not casually, but we pretty simple folk. But that was the intention of the Alter Rebbe, that everyone should get the benefit of Chassidus. And when he was released, he felt that there was the go-ahead, and in fact, that's the medicine that we all need. So, Hayom Yom, the 18th day, which would have been today, Monday, and the last entry into the Hayom Yom is that the Tzemach Tzedek writes that the love expressed in the verse, "Besides you, I wish for nothing," which is from Tehillim, means that one should desire nothing other than Hashem, not even heaven or earth. In other words, our attachment to Him and our attachment to being connected to Him, and that our neshamas should be awoken and alive and real to their own potential and in connection with Hashem. This should be our only desire, and not even Shamayim or Aretz. In other words, this desire to be connected to Hashem is higher. The higher Gan is even more important than achieving entry into the higher Gan Eden or the lower Gan Eden, because these were created with a mere Yud. So we spoke about all of the world being created from the letters of Hashem's name, and the Yud, that's the source of, that's connected to the name Havaya, and it's the source of all creation. But it says this love of Hashem is to be directed to him alone, to his very being and essence. And this was actually expressed by my master and teacher, the Alter Rebbe, when he was in a state of devekut, and he exclaimed as follows, because the Hayom Yom, is not written by the Alter Rebbe, right? The Hayom Yom was written by our Rebbe, put it together based on the writings of the Frierdiker Rebbe. But the Alter Rebbe said, I want nothing at all. I don't want your Gan Eden. I don't want your Olam Haba. I want nothing but you alone. So that's the culminating comment of the Hayom Yom. And it ends with Good Yom Tov. May you be inscribed and sealed for a good year in the study of Chassidus and the ways of Chassidus. And then if we go on the same moment, because learning never stops, we begin and we end right away. If we go to the first entry, which is Yud Tes Kislev, the first entry is that it tells us that Yud Tes Kislev, which is now tonight and tomorrow, was the yortzeit of the Mezritcher Maggid, who of course was the Alter Rebbe's teacher, the Mezritcher Maggid, and also the day that the Alter Rebbe was released from his first imprisonment in 1798 towards evening. And then the Alter Rebbe wrote a letter and he said, this indeed must be made known, that on the day that Hashem made for us, the 19th of Kislev, Tuesday, well, this year it's Tuesday also, the day on which it was good, and it was said twice in Torah that it was good. It's the Yotzar of our holy teacher, whose soul is in Gan Eden. While I was reading in the book of Tehillim the verse, he redeemed my soul in peace, which is from Sefer Tehillim, Tehillim 55, verse 19. Before beginning the following verse, I emerged in peace by the act of Hashem, the God of peace. So he was saying Tehillim when he was freed, and the verse in Tehillim that he was saying was, he redeemed my soul in peace. And then he was freed by an act of Hashem, an act of peace. And then it continues and it says, Yud Tes Kislev should be a day of Verbringen and good resolutions towards establishing times to study the revealed Torah, which we do together on Wednesday night, and Chassidus, which we're doing right now, and in bolstering the ways of Chassidim in true friendship. And I'm happy to say in true friendship that you gals got to talk, and that was an act of true friendship. It is customary to apportion volumes for the study of the Talmud according to the procedure set out in Ageret HaKodesh, Hochai Tochiach. In Lubavitch, since the year 1902 to 1903, this allocation was made on Tavis 24th, the yortzeit of the Alter Rebbe, there not being enough time on Yud Tes Kislev, so that they would hand out the Gemaras, basically, in a particular Seder, but then it says that they didn't have enough time to do it on Yud Tes Kislev, so they actually did it on the 24th of Tavis, which is the Alter Rebbe's yortzeit, not his day of being freed, but his yortzeit. Okay, so that's the Hayom Yom. So now we're going to go into the Tanya, and I want to do it looking at the Chaim Miller volume, because it has explanations that are helpful to me. But if you want me to put it on the text on the screen, Susan, do you usually follow on the screen, or you just listen usually? You're muted, so I can't really hear your answer. You're muted, so I can't really hear your answer.
Yeah, sorry. No, I'm too tired to follow on the screen.
So you don't follow on the screen anyway. Okay, so that's fine. All right, so I'm going to just do it from the text inside, because I just think for tonight that's the way I want to do it. So
Okay.
chapter 6 is all about our Yetzer Hara.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the previous 4 chapters, we have discussed and elaborated on the divine soul, its nature, its mental and emotional powers, its garments of thought, speech, and action. And in this chapter, we are going to look at the animal soul, which we discussed in chapter 1, which is the source of negative, self-centered consciousness. So we're going to see that basically the animal soul doesn't have the capacity to be bitul. It's self-orientated, it's self-concerned, it doesn't get out of the way, it doesn't make space for this great big other, which is Hashem. And that is really the dominating thing about the animal soul, is its self-concern. So it says, V'hinei ze l'umat ze asa Elokim. Hashem has made one opposite the other. So we've seen this concept of one opposite the other. Moshe Rabbeinu was a great prophet, and then it says Bilam, the Goyim, had to have also great prophet, otherwise they'd say it's not fair. The Jews had Moshe, and who did we have? So they had Bilam. But right here it says, in order for us to have free choice, we have positive and negative forces within the universe in perfect equilibrium. The positive and negative forces have not only the same amount of power, but they have the same architecture. And it's interesting to talk about the soul as having an architecture, but that's really what it does in Tanya. It talks about the structure of the soul and how it's constructed in different ways. So, ki kamo shenefesh ha'elokis klula me'esa sfirot kedushot, just like the divine soul is comprised of 10 holy sfirot, or energies, and there's 10 energies are dressed in 3 holy garments of righteous thought, righteous speech, and righteous action. The animal soul also has a similar architecture of 10 energies and 3 garments of its own. Only the force which powers it comes from the negative power of the Sitra Achra, the other side of self-serving, egoic energy. So they're always going to, everything goes in energetic direction. So if you think about the godly soul, it's going towards other, and the other is God and God's creatures and God's world. It's other directed. And the animal soul is going to be me, me directed, my needs, my wants, my standing, my comfort, etc. So this force of me, so the animal soul has these 10 energies, the 10 sphirot, and the 3 garments, which come from this other side of self-serving egoic energy called miklipot noga. Its power is from the force known as klippa noga, the bright klippa, whose negativity is not irredeemable and can be realigned for the good. So what is going to be explained is that the good things that we have to do and we should do and we're supposed to do, and that are mitzvot. And they're bad things that we definitely should not do. And then there's like the neutral space in the middle. And this is where there's a power of klipa noga. So its power is potentially redeemable. So just before we go on, Chaim Miller explains very beautifully that in order for us to activate our godly soul, we have to be conscious. We have to be choosing. We have to choose, like what my yoga teacher, Paula, teaches us in yoga, is that we have to stand against the forces of gravity. Because the force of gravity wants to pull the body down into sluggish and bent over and lazy. And through strengthening our physical body, we resist the forces of gravity to stand up straight. That's what any physical practice is going to encourage us to do. And you can see people's bodies who don't exercise. They get very rolled down and hunched, and their shoulders roll forward and their head rolls forward and their back gets bent. So the same way that Tanya explains that if we don't make any effort at all, the animal soul is our natural. The listening to the instincts of the animal soul is our natural habitat, so to speak. And it's going to take effort on our behalf to choose good and think good and do good, because there's a sort of natural inclination to just be in the hangout space of the animal soul. Okay. While the animal soul is spiritual and not confined to a particular place, its point of interaction with the body is in the blood, where it is present. It is the source of your physical vitality. So, Esav had a lot of energy, a lot of chayas. Lots of people have chayas, and their chayas isn't always directed in the best places, right? And we know that we have 365 negative lo ta'aseh mitzvot, which are going to curtail all of those, every blood vessel, veins and blood vessels, 365 apparently in the body, all connected to something where we have to hold back the blood, the passion, the animalistic vitality that we have within us. So the animal soul is not in a particular place. Its point of interaction with the body is in the blood. And the 10 powers, the 10 sfirot within the animal soul are referred to in the Zohar as 10 crowns of impurity. 10 crowns of impurity. Now the thing is that in some way it's natural for us to give in to the tendencies of the animal soul, but in another way, to do that we have to detach from our inner self. So it's a little bit contradictory here, because it actually says to sin or engage in destructive behavior, you need to detach your consciousness from your inner self, which yearns to be good and wholesome. That is why the negative forces are described as a crown which is detached from the head. So on the one hand, if you're lazy and you're not being conscious and you're not being conscientious, you could just very easily fall into the clutches, so to speak, of the animal soul. But on the other hand, the powers of the animal soul are called a crown which is detached from the head, because somewhere you're disengaging from your consciousness, from your awareness. That's why they say a person doesn't sin unless they're possessed by a ruach shtus, which means you're not in your right mind. Because if you're in your right mind, there's something in you that wants to do good, but this crown is detached from the head. So kind of told you a little bit contradictory things, and I hope I can clarify. On the one hand, I said the animal soul is sort of, when we're not paying attention, we can just slump into the animal soul, and we need to make conscious effort to go against it, like the force of gravity. We have to make conscious effort to stand up straight. On the other side, we're also saying that in order for us to be ensnared in the animal soul's clutches, we have to detach from our consciousness and our conscious way of being. These powers of the animal soul consist of 7 negative emotional powers. Right? We've got our 7 positive mitzvot, and then we have our 7 negative mitzvot, midot, sorry, not mitzvot. 7 negative emotional powers emanating from the 4 negative elements. So what are the elements? We've spoken about this in Tanya before. And sometimes when you're learning Tanya, it's like you're drawing a map and you've got pieces and you've got lines and circles. It's like a big flow chart. So you've got 4 of this and 3 of that and 10 of that, and you've got to try and make sense of it. But the 4 elements are the 4 elements that are alive in the world, in every single thing of creation. We've got
Wait, you
fire.
said 7. What's the difference between the 4 and the 7?
The 7 are the midot, the emotional attributes, and the 4 are the elements in the world.
Okay.
Fire, water, air, and earth. And then each of them are connected to some of these midot. So fire gives rise to anger. Water gives rise to self-indulgence. Air gives rise to shallowness, and earth gives rise to laziness. So I think, like in the lessons from Tanya, actually, I'll just share it briefly. There he brings a nice example where he says, what does he say? Where does he say? He compares each thing that the chesed of the one becomes, let's just see, So he says, from chesed, instead of kindness, you get anger. In gevura, instead of strength, you get boastfulness. In each, and he doesn't give us actually any more examples, but for each midah where you could have a positive aspect of it, in the animal soul will have the same midah, the same kind of energy, but instead of it going to a holy place, it's going into a not so holy place. So with your passion, instead of it going into kindness, it can go into anger, because it's still coming from fire. And the water, instead of it going into a positive channel, it goes into a negative manifestation of the same thing. So the divine soul shares the same architecture as the animal soul: 3 mental and 3 emotional powers. However, the way in which the emotions and intellect function in the animal soul is different. And this is where he says, the divine soul's emotions arise only after reflection. To arouse the divine soul, we need reflection, contemplation, and that's why it's such a big mitzvah to learn Torah, because learning Torah and davening and saying Tehillim, which is a little bit different than davening, but it's very similar, they all feed into the capacity that we have to contemplate godliness and godly things. And so that's going to bring a rise to the divine soul emotion, which is to love or revere an invisible God. Consciousness needs to depart from the tangible to the realm of abstract thought, so as to perceive the universe in a broader context. You will never have any feelings for Hashem unless you contemplate the meaning of reality first. So sometimes you could also go to beautiful places and see beautiful scenery and feel, the expansiveness of Hashem's creation. But what Chaim Miller is explaining here is that you need some kind of external stimulus to awaken you to have these emotions of love and fear and all of that. It's fed by prayer and learning and contemplation. But the animal soul, on the other hand, its emotions are natural and elemental, requiring little or no thought at all. They are the lowest states of consciousness into which you will naturally regress unless you make a concerted effort otherwise. So now that we're close to the times of Mashiach, and there's so many people talking about a shift in consciousness, that the Goyim are talking about it, the Hopis, the Indians are talking about it, the Mayans are talking about it, everybody's talking about it. So what do they talk about? They talk about a shift in consciousness from a level of consciousness which is much more dense and material, which is what we're calling the animal soul. It's a level of soul that deals with physicality. I want, I need, I'm hungry, I'm cold, I'm lonely, I'm weepy, whatever. That's kind of being in our denser reality. And then if we want to evolve and we want to go into higher levels of consciousness, we have to function on a higher frequency, which is not so dense. It's going to be more abstract. It's going to be more refined. That's where you need to make the conscious effort, the concerted effort. The intellect of the animal soul, which produces negative emotions and behaviors, mirrors the divine soul and is divided into three: Chochmah, Bina, Das, the source of these emotions. While thoughtless, visceral emotion represents the core behavior of the animal soul, it still has a level of intellect. Because even if you're looking for your own pleasure, for example, you want to go buy an ice cream, or you want to go eat more cheesecake, or whatever you want to do, you still know that that's what you want. It's still passing through the level of Chochmah, Bina, Dad. It's still, ice cream. Where should I go to get it? Oh, okay. I'll go to Wesley Kosher and go to Hava Java or whatever. Because the emotions are relative to the intellect, which is why a child desires and loves small, trivial things, since his intellect is too small and immature to appreciate anything more valuable. Similarly, the child is angered and infuriated by small things, and the same is true with showing off and other negative traits, which are all relative to the child's intellectual depth. So the animal soul does have an aspect which is managed by the intellect. And the younger the child, the more immature the intellect, the more the animal soul is going to be drawn to little silly things. Candies. It's going to want little things that like a child wants, and it's going to get upset like a child gets upset. So a small child, and I can't help thinking about my somewhat emotional little granddaughter who's 3.5. She's a very great example of this. She can get upset of little 3.5-year-old things, and she can want little 3.5-year-old things. A much bigger animal soul, like a sophisticated animal soul, maybe wants much more sophisticated things, a concert, a very nice steak and a very nice glass of wine and a very fancy restaurant. It's still the intellect, and maybe the intellect even gets more sophisticated, fancy philosophical things that are, not godly, but more sophisticated. So the animal soul has an intellect And the intellect is as sophisticated as the person is who's is the animal. If they're a 3-year-old animal or a 4-year-old or a 24-year-old or a 36-year-old. There is an aspect where it's just like the higher aspects of us start off in the Chokhmah Bin and Dad. So the animal aspects of us start off in the Chokhmah Bin and Dad. Yes, we all together on that. So we're looking at, so that was
I'm walking away for a second just to get paper.
Okay. He'll give me a chance to say bracha on my water. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyeh bidvaro. And I'm assuming that Dina Bracha said Amen in her space. I also want to dedicate tonight's class to Yisrael Benjamin ben Avraham and Shana Gittel, the person that I dedicated last week our classes to, Shana Gittel Bas Shmuel Mendel, my brother's mother-in-law, who passed away, who was a very good friend of my mom's, and Yisrael Benjamin ben Avraham, who passed away also. So I'm dedicating the class to them this week as well. Okay, so that was looking at the architecture of the animal soul. Now, the next part of this chapter is going to talk about the fact that there's no spiritually neutral action. That everything we do, even the things that aren't officially either a mitzvah or an avera, are things that are going to orientate either to a self-orientated direction or to a giving direction. That's what's going to be talked about. That actually everything we do, and this is a very amazing thing that I got much more conscious of in the last 6 months, I'd say, that we're constantly choosing our life in every moment. In every moment where we make a choice. For example, let's say we have a thought, and the thought is somebody heard us and we just remembered that we got insulted by that person or hurt by that person. In the split second, we have the thought to dwell on that or turn away from it and move on to something else. And that's going to make that moment completely different. And it's just, where's our thought going to go? To dwell on a hurt or an insult, or to move away and to dam lekaf schus and to go in a different direction? We're constantly choosing. And when we're constantly choosing, every little teeny tiny thing we do, we are either moving in a direction towards Hashem, or we're moving in a direction towards that egoistic aspect of ourselves. So let's go inside. So having described the 10 core faculties of the animal soul, its intellect and emotions, we now turn to its tools of expression, the garments of thought, speech, and action. So we're familiar with this because the godly soul had the same garments, thought, speech, and action. While the garments of the divine soul are a vehicle for all things sacred, the animal soul expresses an opposing energy through its impure garments. Your conscious activities of thought, speech, and action might be pure or impure at any given moment, depending on which of your two souls is powering them. So if you imagine that you literally have two batteries operating in your operating system. One battery is providing all the energy and all the power for all your good things that you do. And you literally have another operating system, another battery that is powering up all the self-orientated things that you're doing. They're two systems. And the Tanya is going to tell us that your actions are either powered by this system or that system. There's not a neutral. Either it's powered by the animal soul or it's powered by the godly soul. Now, when you use these 10 impure powers of the animal soul to think, to speak, or act, then that thought in your brain, or that word in your mouth, or that power of action in your hands, or other limb, are called the impure garments into which the 10 impure powers of the animal soul are dressed at the moment of action, speech, or thought. So maybe you were thinking that a lot of your actions are neutral. Maybe you were thinking that most of your actions are neutral, but in fact they're not. They either powered by the godly soul, which, by the way, knows that you need to eat. You eat l'shem shemai. You eat to be healthy, to serve Hashem. Then it's not then you're doing it, with the holy kavanah. There's a lot of things that we do in the physical world that we can be doing in a holy way. So it's not so simple. But let's just keep going and see how it clarifies. An important paradigm shift which emerges from the Tanya's doctrine of two souls, or what I was calling two operating systems, is that there's no such thing as a spiritually neutral activity. In Jewish law, we find 3 categories of behavior. What's required, what's religiously required, such as keeping the Shabbos or giving tzedakah, that's number 1. The religiously forbidden, don't eat pig or don't steal. And then all the ordinary acts, which are neither religiously required nor forbidden, like checking your email or buying clothes. According to the Tanya, however, it would be a mistake to conclude that this 3rd category is spiritually neutral. Even an ordinary behavior will either promote God consciousness or ego consciousness, depending on your attitude. There is no 3rd option. And Chaim Miller is a very great student of Torah and Tanya. He translated the whole thing beautifully with a lot of, insight. And I love the way he says it. It's either this or that. There's no 3rd option. And so maybe till this minute, or maybe me a few minutes before, because I prepared this before I taught it, we thought that a lot of our actions are neutral, but in fact they're not. They're either serving towards a godly purpose and helping us do things so we can fulfill mitzvahs, making a house, getting married, growing food, eating food, setting a table. That's all so we can do the mitzvah of serving Hashem, having a family, having children, making a house, all of that. But nothing is neutral. Unless you make an effort to carry out an ordinary act amid a higher awareness, the inertia of the animal soul will steer it into ego consciousness. So here, the Tanya is making another point, that there's a lot of things you could be doing that could be godly if you have in your mind a kavanah, that's an intention. I am serving Hashem now as I'm eating my dinner because I want to have energy so I can do X, Y, and Z to serve Hashem. That's a consciousness. As opposed to, oh my gosh, I'm so hungry, I can't wait to sit down and munch my dinner because I'm starving. So that's kind of putting in a consciousness that can make this shift. It is these thoughts, words, and actions of the animal soul that constitute all the things that are done under the sun, which are all empty and a strain to the spirit. That's a quote from Ecclesiastics. And the Zohar writes in the Torah portion of Beshalach, they are destructive to the spirit. So basically what the Tanya is saying is, please be conscious of what you're doing. Please put kavanah in your action. Please, there's some editions of some sidurim that they have this l'shem mitzvah. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but there's before certain brachas of a mitzvah, then they say, there's a little line of a kavona. I'm doing this for the sake of a mitzvah, or I'm doing this for the sake of Hashem. So what we've just learned here is quite an encouragement that when we're doing something that we think is neutral, if we put a holy kavana in it, it's going to serve the godly soul and be an act of serving Hashem. And if we're unconscious about those neutral actions, they could very easily be serving the animal soul. And then it says, and it continues, this applies not only to actions, but also to any ostensibly neutral spoken word or thought, which, while not religiously forbidden, are not consciously directed towards Hashem to fulfill His will or in His worship. Okay, so, I mean, we know that there were holy tzaddikim that literally could account for every second of their day. Like I think the Chofetz Chaim was such a person. He could think back on his day and account for every minute what his consciousness was doing, and did he waste any time. So I'm not sure that we're on such a madrega, but in fact I know we're not on such a madrega, but we are on a madrega that, let's say we at a Shabbos meal and everybody's eating the food and they're talking about, wow, the challah is so amazing, the sourdough that they have in Monsey now, it's gewaldig, and this dip is better than that dip, and this, I made these cookies and I used gluten-free flour and blah, blah, blah. To have a kavana to understand that, to put Torah into the conversation. Like you're sitting there and everyone's talking, everybody's enjoying Shabbos, but to just
elevate,
to just elevate. And sometimes it's apparent and it's easy, and sometimes it's not. But if it's a Shabbos afternoon or a Shabbos meal, sometimes people get together on Shabbos afternoon and they're doing a beautiful thing, because we know Hasidim should get together. But if you think about it, there's that little capacity to just, turn the switch just a little bit. So now we're going to start talking about the Sitra Achra. So what is it? Because it says if we're not being conscious, then things can start to serve this other side. What's the other side? The Sitra Achra. What is the meaning of Sitra Achra? The other side, anything that's not the holy side. Anything that's not dafka holy. So the other side includes all religiously forbidden activity and any ordinary act that isn't directed towards Hashem's will or His worship. So not to be too strict, because if people are sitting happily on Shabbos and they're observing Shabbos and they're eating kosher food and they're enjoying, there's a lot of that you're fulfilling Hashem's will right there. I don't want to guilt trip, because it says here, the other side includes all religiously forbidden activity and any ordinary act not directed towards Hashem's will or worship. So a lot of the things we do, we are doing what Hashem wants us to do. But if we have that extra level of kavanah, of fulfilling Hashem's will, it kind of, I feel like it can make a subtle difference. So what then is the definition of the holy side? Because we said the Sitra Achra is anything that's not serving Hashem or His will, or isn't actually, so Sitra Achra is doing something forbidden or an ordinary thing that's not directed towards Hashem. So what then is the holy side? So the holy side includes only something into which God's holiness can be drawn and be present. So conversations between friends, when you're giving a friend an ear, a heart, space, time, I would say that could qualify as holy. God's holiness can be drawn and be present. And Hashem's presence will only rest on a thing which has surrendered its ego to him. Okay, so here is the kind of the clarifying factor. And I guess this is what's going to make it either a Sitra Achra thing or a Kedusha thing. Where is the ego in all of this? If the ego at your Shabbos meal is, oh my gosh, I made such amazing food, I'm such a great cook, I'm such a great hostess, I'm the best of the best. So obviously that's not bitul. The other side, same food, same meal, same friends, might even be the same conversation actually. Two friends talking about what's on their heart. But the one is, Baruch Hashem, I'm surrendered. This is Hashkocha Pratis, I'm blessed. I have what I have because Hashem gave it to me. That bitul is what's going to bring Hashem's presence in. Hashem's presence will only rest on a thing which has surrendered its ego to him. So when it's I, you're on the wrong track. When it's I'm a vessel, I'm a channel, it's him, then that's the best. That's the big difference. In the Tanya's worldview, an experience of bitul, surrendering the ego to Hashem, is a fundamental prerequisite to real living. It represents the departure from a personal consciousness that attributes separate existence to the self, to gradually embrace a transpersonal vision that sees all existence as embedded in a universe saturated with the divine. So in other words, the whole point of creation, and I've said this before, Hashem plays hide and seek. He does tzimtzum, till eventually in the physical world, he's really hiding behind a lot of veils. And he wants us to come and find him and reveal him and say, I see you hiding under that veil. I see you hiding under that veil. But all those veils were designed to give us the free choice to feel that we exist independently of him. But the biggest thing he doesn't want us to do is really believe that we're separate from him. He's giving us veils so we could be fooled into thinking we're separate, and we could be misled into thinking we're separate. But really, that's to give us free choice. And our spiritual effort is to be directed to feeling as not separate as possible. That actually, ein od milvado, God is permeating everything, and we're part of this big divine tapestry, and that our own existence is really just part of the symphony. And that's the dance, because he wanted us to have that option to feel separate, but he doesn't want us to be fooled by the separateness, and he wants us to look under the veils to feel the non-separateness. Yeah, that's understood? Okay, so any shift of the animal soul in this direction of seeing its connectedness, whether it's, and this is beautiful, whether it's just a mere willingness to listen to a higher truth. Anytime the animal soul is making a little space in its very me orientated consciousness, just to get a glimpse of the higher reality, just even a purely cerebral appreciation of Hashem's presence, or even he does a complete tshuva and a total realignment of being, it's all could be called bitul. Just the smallest opening of the window to a bigger truth, that's already bitul, even a little bit. Once bitul has begun, the ego is punctured and divine light can start to seep through the cracks. intensifying the experience of bitul, which can occur at many different levels, requiring a lifetime of spiritual work. So here we've got the whole thing in a nutshell, which is a pun because klippa is a shell. But anyway, here's the whole story in a nutshell. We, in a physical world with the animal soul, want to think that the whole story is about us, and we're very self-involved and self-referencing. The minute we start opening even a little crack to the fact that the picture is actually bigger, and we just a part of the bigness, the more we open, that's the more we become spiritually evolved, until we crack open the whole klippa, the whole pretense, the whole illusion of our separateness, and then we become enlightened. Then we become truly united, and we live a very God-conscious life, because we realize that we're just in this ocean of God, and we just, as I said in a class before, we just God dressed up as Bracha, or God dressed up as Susan, or God just dressed up as Dina Bracha. We're just manifestations of how he wants to appear in the world in our particular manifestation, as you or me or her or she, but it's all God. Just God's dressing up in different aspects of him, he wants to express himself in different ways. In you, he wants to express himself as Susan. In me, he wants to express himself as Bracha, and etc., etc. And that's the essence of all our spiritual avoda, is to crack open this thing, this little nut that has this hard shell, and say, oh, I can become more and more receptive and perceptive of the godliness that's permeating me and everything else.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. I'll just finish this paragraph and then we'll stop, because we're in the middle of the chapter, but I don't want to go on because it is so intense and so amazing. I'll just finish this idea. So bitul opens an individual to Hashem, regardless of whether it is an active conscious bitul, as it is always the case with the supernal angels, who are constantly enraptured by God's presence, or even if the bitul lies dormant. So your bitul can be very, very expressed, like it, to the point like an angel is completely aware that it's nothing except part of Hashem's reality, right? But even if you kind of closed in this way, there's a subconscious level of bitul, and it's lying dormant. The lowest level of bitul is subconscious. Merely possessing a divine soul means that you have the potential for bitul dormant in your being. Isn't that nice to know? This is always true of every person in Israel, down here in this world, who by virtue of his or her divine soul has the potential for complete surrender to Hashem by giving his or her life in martyrdom for Hashem, or surrendering their preconceived notions of Hashem and opening to this complete new way of being.
Oh, the path of the Baal Tshuva, which...
Right, your old life is gone, and your new life is a surrendered life, maybe. You hope. Yeah. So I think because it is so intense and full, and because it's 3 minutes to 9, we won't, and we don't have time to finish. We don't have time to finish the whole chapter, but that is a lot of very amazing things, I think. Any comments or questions?
I couldn't receive this. I've said this many times. I couldn't have received this in the past, and something has changed over the years that I could receive this. is a miraculous thing, you
Well,
know?
I couldn't teach this in the past, so the
Mhm.
fact that
No,
I can teach it is also part of
yeah.
the same miracle. So, um, yeah, because we are evolving and we are trying with our humble effort to make this real, this Balchuva journey, and we're trying to understand what it means, and we're trying to learn, and we're trying to be receptive to teachings that come from holy teachers. And it's nice to know that, what we couldn't do before, we can do now.
You can't stand still is basically what it's saying. It's either growing or you're not, but there's no staying still. So this is like layers and layers and layers over
Right. I mean,
decades, literally.
sometimes I feel like I'm a very slow traveler, like a turtle. I remember that I was teaching in Machon Chana, and this was when I was first married, so we're talking about almost 39 years ago. And I would watch girls come in from nothing, 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 and get from, and then get Chabad, and get Hasidish, and then get like in like a matter of, I don't know, a year, 18 months. And I had been from for years and years already. Even then I'd been, and my pace is very slow. And I think you as well, you think things and you chew things, and you're not just a jump into, you're not just a from 0 to 100 kind of a person. And so this is our process. We slowly, moving ahead and chewing and digesting and opening to things we didn't open to before. And this is our way that
Just think
we.
of our first step from, I don't know about you, you may have come from a more spiritual place, but I came from a spiritual desert where you were made fun of if you had even said that you had a belief in God. It was something to ridicule. It was so
Well,
horrendous, slowly.
right. Well, I always felt that I came from a desert place, but I didn't get ridiculed. I mean, my parents did put very concerted effort to stop me becoming frum because they thought it was a bad idea. I mean, I guess so that does count because they put up very real resistance. And I did feel like I was coming from a very, very far place. I felt like I was far out, 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 out in the bundu, like right in the, far away place. But here we are, and we're learning Tanya, and it's Yutis Kislev, so l'chaim, l'chaim.
Hey, Mahaim.
May the light of Chassidus illuminate all of our paths and our actions and our deeds and our thought and our speech and our action. And better late than never. And now is as good a time as any. And our
It's layers. It's all it is layers, you know?
right. And our pace is the perfect pace, that it needs to be.
Yeah.
So
I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be in a place where I could receive this stuff now, whatever shifted over the years. Very, very
right.
grateful.
Yeah, well,
Thank you,
good.
Bracha. Thank you
All
so much.
right. All
Your
right. And
efforts are really appreciated.
yeah, good Yontov, I appreciate you too because it's Dina Bracha can't come on the video and then I can't see her, and it's more, she even likes it better when you come because she feels bad if I'm just talking to her.
Oh, she's so
So
lovely. I'm so glad I got to speak to
yeah,
her.
good. Okay, so good
Okay.
night
Be
and
well.
sei gesund
Good
and
night.
good Yontov.
Thank you.